Hey guys, so thanks for coming. I see familiar faces and new faces, so that's wonderful. So first I'm going to talk about the projects I'm currently working on as an artist, and then I'm going to talk about the Art and Culture Center and that valuable community that I work with. And I have Virginia Feifeld here, she's in the presentation, which I'm excited about. And I've been here a year and a half, so I'm a pretty new transplant to the area. And a lot of times people ask me, how do you do both? Be an artist, be a curator, and work with multiple institutions? That question comes up regularly, even from dealers and from directors. So I think it's a good way to start. And for me, I think of slide presentations as a reflection, and I also think about them as accessible. So I'm not up here lecturing, so if you have questions about works, just pipe in and say, hey, I'm curious about this. So this is the project I'm currently working on. I started installing yesterday at Locust Projects for a show that opens April 21st, so 2 Saturdays from now. So I'm day 2 into installing 3 installations that I've been working on for 2 years. It's the first time that I will see multiple installations in one room with a fabric treatment. It's the first time I've done that. And this one is called The Sanctuary for the classes. And this is the first installation I started making when I moved to Miami. And this was taken at Art Center. For those of you who don't know Art Center, it's on Lincoln Road. It's a really long-standing institution and residency, and it's moved a couple of times. They sold a building and they have a really big endowment now, and they're finding ways to support local and to support international artists. And they actually just released a huge grant called the Ellie, which it seems like it will really change some artists' lives in this community, which I think is excellent. And it's changed my life to be there as an artist. It's a subsidized studio, so it's very affordable. It's like paying for parking in Miami. It's really, and they also give back every time that you're in an exhibition through them, or you do a program out of your studio. So for me, that was a really nice entryway as an artist into this community, to be able to have that. I moved down here for my position at the Art and Culture Center, and I was very worried at first about, in my kind of former roles as I've been a professor and I've also run a university gallery before, and I would find that those 2 career paths were working against each other in subtle ways. Like, I would have never been able to come to Art Basel like maybe 3 years ago because I would have been giving a final exam. And there were things that I was really struggling with and didn't want to give up on. So I came down here with the mindset of, you're just going to do both and people are going to accept you, and if they don't, you're just going to keep going, and keep progressing. And I found actually that there are a lot of artist curators in this community, both in Miami and Broward, like South Florida as a region, also West Palm. There's a lot of people really doing both things, or artists who are professors that they just want to be involved in the progression of art and also make their work. And I really believe that that's my role in life, is to make work and foster artists along the way. So this piece is really about wanting to get people to sit down in space on a very basic level. We're so plugged into our phones and screens that we don't really congregate in spaces, and I find a lot in architectural buildings, or even my workplace, that there are always areas that are underutilized in every building, So for me, I wanted to make work where I could encourage other artists to be and to have conversations. And I really feel that in our country, we don't talk about class. We finally can talk about race, which I'm really excited about, and diversity, but we're still really confused about how to talk about systematically how our society operates and how some people really struggle to get ahead. And for me, as a working artist, I have to work. It's not a choice. It's just not. It's the way I pay my bills. And I feel like it's important to talk about it. And so artists who can reflect on that in a space that's actually comfortable and invites you in, I enjoy that dialogue. And so this is all made out of fabric. The door is denim. There's an armature inside it. It unzips. Everything is fully collapsible, and then it can be taken to other spaces. I wanted to talk, because this is an artist career talk as well, like figuring out careers in the arts and how they operate. I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind lately called Wage. If you don't know this website, you should go to this website often. It's for working working artists for the greater economy is what it stands for. This is a site that I refer to every time I write a proposal. And at Locust Projects, that's an institution that you can apply for. They have a rolling open call. And it was one of the first institutions I applied for when the former director is now at MoCA, Shauna. She accepted the work, and the new director, Lori Mertes, is working on the project with me with a new exhibition coordinator too named Ricky Moore. So when I wrote my proposal to show this work, I went to the Wage website and looked at what other institutions are paying for their artists to have solo exhibits, solo projects, two-person exhibitions. And I would like the Art and Culture Center to be Wage certified, and also Art Center of South Florida to be Wage certified. These are two institutions that are referring to the Wage site, which I think even that's a big step. And as artists, actually change starts with us, within institutions. If we always say that every time that we have to show our work, we need to be paid, or lecture, or then we're supporting our whole community of artists by saying this is actually a profession. It's not a labor of love. Like, of course we love our work, but that doesn't change. Getting paid is always important. So this is something that I really want to talk about. I feel like South Florida is actually, all of these institutions, especially the Frank, they pay their artists. They're not just asking artists to work for free, but I know that in my entire 20s, I did so much work for free that I became tired and very cranky about it. So now I like to bring this up whenever I have a career talk with other artists in the room, that you can really go to this site, and this is a slider. So Printed Matter is a space where I have a couple of books, and they're actually fabric books. It's in New York. It is a kind of zine style institution. They have exhibitions as well. But they have some of my work, and so I brought this up as an institution that I've worked with and what their supportive structure is. And I'm pitching a project to the ICA through their education department for the summer. It just went through the other day, and I looked at ICA Boston when I wrote up my project budget, because most places they ask you for your idea and your budget. So if you don't know what you're asking for, you can really shortchange yourself and realize that a project is more expensive than you thought it would be, and that's very easy to do. And with this labor of love mentality that I think we all just have naturally, that we've grown up with this and felt that way through school, we often say to ourselves, oh, well, that's okay. I'm just going to put some more money into this. And you should really be going, no, how much do all of my materials cost? Can I build into support for myself, like paying contract laborers and hiring other artists to help me in this process? And also, I should be paid something as an honorarium for even producing an idea. And designers work this way. If you're a graphic designer, you don't do something for free. Like you have a budget for each client. So I think if you don't know about this site, visit it often whenever you apply to anything. And also, as a curator, I look at this site when I'm paying artists, thinking about, well, how does my institution compare? And if my institution's not doing a good job of this, how can I change it and push for it for next year's budget? This is another piece. It's in the same context of the sanctuary. It's called the Lady Cave. Lady Cave has shown 3 times here. It was part of Gritty and Pink with Lisa Rockford as one of her independent curatorial projects at Bailey Contemporary up in Pompano. Then it went to Davy at Young at Art, and now it's one of the 3 installations that's going to be in Locust. And this was the first piece that I made that in a long time. I took a hiatus from installation art between undergrad and grad school. I had moved to New York and had no space. I had freaked out. I didn't know how to make the work that I had been making. And I was really kind of startled by how you make something and then you dismantle it and then it goes into storage. And so it was really kind of, I took several years off from that. And when I was in grad school, I wasn't making the work that I'm making now, but I've been doing installations since like 2004. And this piece something happened to me where I was displaced from an artist's studio live space that my partner and I had been building onto and making into a beautiful exhibition space. And I talk about these things, I know they're deep, but they're also real, and I also have a sense of humor about them. But we were displaced, and it really it shook me up completely. I mean, I went on vacation, I had a spring break. This was when I was teaching, so I had a week for spring break, and I went up to Maine, and I joked that year it didn't feel like spring or a break because I found out that basically I was returning to a space that I could never live in again. And it brought up all this trauma from my past when like my parents separated and I moved to Maine, and I had coincidentally been visiting my mother, and I was just like, how is this happening to me? And I'm a professor, and I'm these things that I had been checking off my list. Like, I've been checking off these boxes, and I'm still totally failing at living and working in the same place. This is so interesting, and you know what? I'm not alone. Like, so many artists have this narrative. So now the work is about that a little bit, and this was the first piece that I called the Lady Cave, and it was really supposed to be, and it is a feminine space where there's masks, there's selfies in there. It is actually very light and interesting. The lights modulate, and there's a video piece in there. My response to being displaced and to working through depression was actually to just open an artist-run space for a year. I was surprised that was my response, but I felt so bad that the only thing I could do was to give back to people. It was the weirdest response, but I'm glad I did it because it was a year of momentum where I just felt like really good. And I was in New Haven at the time. The show's called New Havens, about the place I was displaced from, and also thinking of these installations as havens for conversation. And I wasn't going to call it that, but the exhibition coordinator was like, you know, I'm not from New Haven, so I don't think of New Havens as being connected to New Haven, and he made me think about the work in this way of making these havens, which was really a gift. When you work with other people and other institutions, they show you things about your work that you might not connect, because I don't believe artists have distance from their work, even if they try. You know, we all try, but I think we're still very much in the work. So, yeah, that artist-run space it was a good time. In New Haven, it has Yale University in it, and that's where I went to school. And for me, that was a dream, going to an Ivy League school. It was a very expensive dream, because I'm still paying for it. But I realized there was such a divide between this local community with this Ivy League school, and I completely understood it when I was not in the program. I was like, yeah, you know, people who are poor are looking at this institution that is worth billions and billions of dollars, more than a lot of countries, that institution on its own. And they don't feel connected to it. And I don't feel connected to it. So hey, there's a whole arts community here, and for a year I'm just gonna do this programming. And it gave me a lot of life back. It really helped. And I did find a space where I could live and work for a year with my partner, and it was good, and it was hard, and I was like, I could only do it for a year, and then I felt free, like much more free. This is the work so this is the exterior shot of it from Bailey Contemporary. This is another piece called, I call it Personal Paradise, but I don't really believe that's the title of the work yet. This is the one the title I'm still kind of confused by, but you can either lay down on it or have a conversation in it. Most people lay down and look up, and I'm thinking of this a little bit like a therapist's couch, and that's how it's going to be portrayed in a video that I'm making with a videographer. I've decided that it's okay to work with videographers and photographers, that they know what they're doing, and that I'm no longer going to document the work when I don't have to. That I make the work and I want to be in the work with other people. So one of the things that I'm going to do during the course of the show at Locust from April 21st through June 8th is have a program one weekend where I invite artists to talk about their displacement. And I ask them a series of questions. I don't want it to be straight interview style, so there has to be engagement and interaction. And I have to have a relationship to these people when we talk. And I want to specifically talk about artist displacement. I'm also okay with talking about immigration or even like familial displacement within the framing of artist displacement. I think that other traumas will come up, and I think that's good if that happens. I want it to happen. So this is like the therapist station. Another view of it. Actually, it's been shown before in displaced spaces. So this place was at the Ely House in New Haven. It was the last show that I had before I left. And we did a complete artist takeover of this space. And this was an institution that the director lived and worked there. He had an apartment above, and it's beautiful, like Queen Anne architecture. Like, it's one of the most beautiful spaces I've ever been in my life. And it was a former home, which is interesting because the Art and Culture Center is a former home as well. So I've liked these spaces that have prior histories. And this, what happened with this director was that he wasn't raising money to keep the space going. And all the board of trustees died off. They all were old and they died. And what happened was the bank, like Wells Fargo, took the space over and basically just like kicked out this poor guy. And he had a mental breakdown. So this man that I knew named Paul Clappy, he's never recovered from the displacement. I mean, it was his home and gallery. He was kicked out of it. He fell off a ladder. Someone got him a job. He fell off a ladder. He was in the hospital. Like, he's now in like an adult facility and he's recovering. And these are the things that happen to artists. So I don't feel bad about talking about it because I just have been through it. So what we did, and this is the beautiful part, there's a good ending to this. All of the artists petitioned Wells Fargo and said, hey, this is one of the largest and longest institutions that's been in this area. If you take it away, there's really nothing for the local artists here. And the bank was like, if you establish a board and become a 501c3 for real, then yes, you can actually like maintain your business here. So now it's a space for artists, and it's artist run again. The poor guy, Paul, is not the director, and we all keep in touch with Paul and love Paul, but at least it's like it didn't go away forever. So it was interesting to bring, hey, you're welcome. It was interesting to show this in a displaced place, and then to have it be part of the momentum for making it a space for artists again. So yeah, I think it's a really powerful place. It's called the Ely House, if you're interested. So for those of you coming in, I'm talking about installations and artist displacement and how to kind of like support local community, and really there's power in numbers with artists. Like if you really kind of team up together, you can make things happen. This was recently in West Palm Beach with another Lisa Rockford project. It was called Out of the Box, and it's at the White Space Gallery. So every year, the collector who lives there, she allows for an outdoor exhibition. It really kind of brings traffic to her collection, and it also allows local artists to do interventions. So this flag, it says Dream Diversely, and for me, it was nice to actually see this on a white wall. This was the last time I showed it. It was on a really abandoned space, and talking about displacement again, this was the first place I lived after I was displaced. And another couple from the same studio live space lived in the bottom, and we all teamed together to get into a house. And I knew a realtor in New Haven who helped me out of that displacement and helped me find my next space. And I signed like a 4-month lease. And this was the strangest house I've ever lived in. I was on the top floor, and I used to walk by it in the neighborhood that I was in this neighborhood before, a really rough neighborhood of New Haven. That what I liked about it is that it was very working class. So everyone that I interacted with, they all worked and had families, and there was sometimes like some rivalries between my Latin and Black neighbors, which was like, that was hard to see. There was also like a lot of arrests in the area, a lot of like domestic abuse that I saw. So this was one of those areas where it was like, oh my God, you know, I have really great conversations with people, and then I see things and I'm like, how can I help? And then sometimes I walk away. Like, it was just one of those neighborhoods. And for me, the powerful moment about the displacement was that I was working on this big flag and I wanted it to be massive. And I was really feeling a loss of my studio. I had like a sewing room at the time. And I thought, like, if you think that your studio dictates how big your work is, then you're a fool, because you work in fabric, so you can just roll it right up and then you can just air it out one day. So I just made this decision that I measured from my balcony down to the street, or my first step, I should say, and I just knew what the measurement was and what the width was, and I just worked on the flag until it was done. And I just decided that one May I would just let it air out, and I invited my videographer friend who I had appeared in one of her videos to make a video. Like, that's all I need right now. I just need to like air some of this out. And the thing that I like was so happy about was that one of my students saw it, and I didn't know that he had grown up in the neighborhood I was in. So I posted this on Facebook, and he asked me, he's like, Miss Marsh, like, that's in my neighborhood. Do you live there? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, my family's lived there for 20 years. And like, don't go to that park, but go to this one. And like, it was like so sweet. And I was just so happy that like I had connected with that student through this neighborhood. And people were like really interested in this. I mean, the whole day people would be like, oh my God, the color in the neighborhood. And also this house like had been abandoned for a while. And the realtor who rented it to me, if you can imagine, inside it was all remodeled. So I had this really nice apartment, and outside no one knew that anyone lived in there. It was the weirdest thing. And then I knew that there was this window to like do this piece, and then the house would be repainted. So now it's like a really beautiful restored house, you know, and it has a plate on it that says it's a restored house. So there was just that moment. So this is a couple of weavings that I made last year. During the election, about inclusivity and wanting to talk about class. And dear Americans, it's important to start living sustainably together. Sometimes weaving is like a really nice way for me to get back to just like making of the fabric, like how to understand that fabric is a weave and it's slow and methodical, and that our thoughts don't have to be immediate. Because every time you have an exhibition or you give a talk, you're posting about it, you want everything to be immediate, but doing slow work sometimes is really helpful for me. And right now, these pieces, it's funny, I sent them away with another artist that I work with, Aurora Molina, to be in a show in Spain, and they got stuck in the airport for a month. So they were displaced for a little while, but they ended up at the space, so this summer when I go to Europe, I'm just going to go to that artist co-op space and do a program and get my work back. But it was an interesting moment, like in a learning process. This is a piece that I just made, and I've had some interesting conversations about it, like people struggling with it and then other people really embracing it. And I believe in owning your displacement. That's why I'm here talking about it. And I encourage other artists to talk about displacement and immigrants to talk about displacement. But I've also heard the counter argument that some people never get past their displacement, that they don't have the ability or the means or the resources to get past displacement, which I also find is an interesting counter argument that you can really get stuck in displacement. I think of this as a layered message. Like, I'm owning my displacement on a personal level and making it work, but also really wanting people to have a shared narrative and to just open up about it, because I've noticed that displacements often trigger former traumas. And if we talk about trauma in a competitive way, like, my trauma is worse than yours, or this, I've dealt with this, you should understand where I'm coming from, then it's really aggressive. But if we talk about displacement in a way where it can transform into some other type of communication, I think people can actually work through some things. And you can own your displacement by talking. You don't have to own your displacement necessarily by climbing the social ladder. You know, there's other ways to think about it, I think. So kind of dealing with these ideas currently. And this was a piece that I did at Art Center where I activated a vitrine. They have a very complicated space in the front that is very storefront type of space, but I wanted people to actually engage with the space rather than think of it as just a presentation space. I do these ball forms as well that I've done a few projects. This was a collaboration with the Milagros Collective at Young at Art. They're great if you've ever been to Gramps, or you'll notice that the interior is completely painted by them. So they do a lot of commercial work and also art interventions. So I think they're, as a couple, really interesting to work with. And I made these after making these kind of soft Nazar forms. I love the evil eye as a symbol, or the Nazar, like this idea that if someone's looking upon you negatively, you just send those thoughts right back to them or somewhere else. Like, redirecting energy is something that I believe in. So now I'm going to talk about my role as a curator and what the intersection is. And that's really been a goal of mine coming down here. Like, how can I talk about them together and not have to fragment my life? And I feel really like bad for artists when they feel fragmented, where they're like working 3 jobs and then finally sitting down to come to a lecture. It's like, you did a lot today before coming here, so, right? Did a lot today, so, you know, and it's still intense to be at a lecture, so how do we not fragment ourselves so we can really talk about the scope of what we do and get people engaged in different ways? So my communications director at the Art and Culture Center worked out this article with Venice Magazine, which is a Fort Lauderdale publication, and I was really happy that this article came out a year and a half into my post, because really, when I first got here, I was getting to know the community and figuring out how to engage with it. So now I feel like I have some perspective on what that was like. And the article mentions 5 artists, which I was thrilled about being able to talk about the projects. And I also talk a lot about how I'm really interested in work that is social and engaging, and also taking over spaces that aren't necessarily exhibition spaces, you know, that are also overlooked spaces at institutions or opportunities within the community. So I talked about that a lot. And the artist whose work I'm in front of is named Susan Chutan, and she lives in Connecticut. She has family down here. She helped me move down here. She connected me with my mover and my realtor somehow. Like, she helped me literally get situated. And we had always talked about having a show, but for some reason I never showed her work in Connecticut at the 2 spaces I worked at, Art Space in New Haven, who I still donate to and give talks at periodically. They support me and I support them. I'm bringing their curator this year to curate our biennial. I asked a couple of people and they said no, and I was like, Sarah's always traveling and wants to travel more, so let's see if she can curate within our community. And so it made sense with Susan. I was like, okay, we've been talking for a long time, let's do a show here. And she's from here and has never exhibited really here, so it was an interesting moment. And we actually applied for funding, and we didn't get funding for her specific project, so Susan and I went through a New York foundation to get a grant so that we could cover her flight so that she could be present at the opening, which was really great. So also, if you should know that if you get a solo exhibition or solo project and you don't have money to fly there, you can actually apply for funds with the institution helping you. So that was really a good moment where I felt like I had the space and she was willing to work with me to get her here, which was really beautiful. So I was really happy that she is in the background, and I tried to kind of match. I had a feeling the photographer was going to choose that work. I was trying to figure out how to be in the work and to show that it's immersive. And let's see. So that's the work. And sometimes with the participatory work, I end up in the photo documentation because I'm trying to show that you can touch the work and move it around. So we took video. These are pom-poms that are glued to wires. And then we really just drilled into the wall, and they stayed. We glued some of them in, but really, like with the smallest bit, the wire would often stay. And so she, working on this from afar, she sent a bunch of plans, and then we mapped out the space and painted and then drilled, and we inserted the pom-pom wires that she sent. So that this was sort of like a Saul LeWitt. If you don't know who Saul LeWitt is, he's a really famous deceased artist. His wife, Carol LeWitt, runs his estate, and he has managed to, he's a pioneer really in like wall installation conceptual art, where his work is literally a contract, and that is sourced out to a team of Saul LeWitt experts that specialize in certain types of painting and drawing. So there's like sponge paintings, and there's pieces like this where they're more sculptural, and there are people that, as artists, they're all artists, specialize in a type of painting and then get flown all over the world. So Susan is really referencing his work. So it was interesting to get the plans to work with two preparators to fix this and make it work within this space, and then to have Susan come and activate a piece and then be at the opening. So I try to work kind of around these like geographical separations from artists and find ways to bring them here too, so that they can engage with you and your community, and then to support local and to focus on Broward artists as well. So this is the current show. It's up through May 20th. I have 3 shows up at the same time. We have 3 spaces, so that's always interesting, figuring out how to have 3 exhibitions that relate to each other, not having a hierarchical way of looking at them, like one exhibition is more important than the other, and then promoting them effectively so that all the artists feel as though they're equally important. So this show, Habitat, actually came from an artist canceling a show, and I'm not going to say who because there's no point, but an artist canceled, and I was just like, wow. And we actually won a grant for that artist. It was an artist-specific project. So I was really sweating like last month. I was just like, okay, so 2 things here. How do I deal with a space that is rather large? And also, how do I ask these artists to basically work for free, because there's no guarantee that I can pay any of them. It was so depressing for a moment, you know? And then I was like, well, I have to do a group show because it's a lot of stress to give someone that much space with no budget to do a solo show. So the nice freeing part of it was that I was having conversations with a lot of these artists. Pip Brandt is in the front with that doily piece. It's called Blood Veils. And Eurydice is in the back. Pip lives in Hollywood, Eurydice lives in Miami Beach and has a studio at Fountainhead. And Pip has taught so many people in this community over the years. Like everyone I talked to has seemed to have her as a professor or knows her from the community. So it was nice because I had all these conversations with people while I was completing programming, and I wanted to show their work immediately, but I had to wait. So it was just that chance to reach out to all of them. And it became an amazing opportunity because we actually, we did receive the grant after all. So the panel understood, and they were like, we know you're in a bad position and that this wasn't your choice. So there was one moment where I just like had a sigh of relief because I was like, okay, carry on and you'll be fine. And it was nice too because this role at the Art and Culture Center, it's a historic space. It's a 1926 home that then was a funeral home that then became a city-owned building. And it's this lovely space. And there was a year and a half worth of programming when I entered into my role. So I was completing the programming, having like all sorts of experiences with artists, and was kind of ready anyway to start my own programming. And I'm collaborative, so I really like to do group shows, and I like to work with other institutions as well. So I got to know a lot of people really quickly in this community, and I'm very grateful to be here, and this came out of it, which I'm happy about. These are some details of the doilies that Pip collected. I'm focusing on this work a bit because it's a really good intersection between craft and art, high art, where often those two fields are viewed separately, that crafts are connected to the domestic, and rather here this artist is appropriating these doilies and trying to source them. And Pip was telling me it was really hard to find all these doilies. That it was a mission for a while for her. And this is really interesting to me because what you're looking at right now is the ceiling of a wire structure, a steel structure that her husband Dwayne made. So I love this piece because it's this combination for me between the masculine and the feminine, where it's like old school sculptor meets a doily, and I just love it so much. And I look up at it and I'm like, wow, like this is like almost like an abstract piece on its own. Like certain details of this work really excite me. And then this is like entering in. There's like a doily on top of the sculpture. And one of the things that I'm really fascinated by is how you can be in an exhibition inside of a work looking at other artwork. I have 5 minutes. So in this last 5 minutes, there's 2 other shows, a show by Sri Prabha and a show called Plush that Virginia Feifeld is in, with a work that is from 1982, which I'm so excited about. That was the year I was born, and I think it's so interesting. Can I keep going? Are you sure? Okay. But even though I kind of should be wrapping things up, there are a couple things that I have to say. We have a few open calls at the Art and Culture Center for artists, and that is, I encourage you to apply. One is the biennial. It's our 9th biennial that we've done, which is super exciting. I really enjoyed the last one. And you have to be a Florida resident to apply. So it's Florida specific, which increases everyone's chances because it's really about featuring this region that we live in that's this large metro area, but also rural Florida, and encourage other artists that please to apply. It is $50, like there is an application fee. I reassessed that this year, and I was like, well, this is the thing, like artists apply to things, and they spend money applying. It's really tough, and you have to know, you can only apply to so many things that are $50 a year, in my opinion, and you probably only should. So, and I have gotten things that I've paid $50 for, and actually all of the opportunities that I've had recently, I've had to apply for. So I'm always applying for opportunities, and I encourage you to as well. So this year, the thing that I'm changing is there used to be a series of awards that the Art and Culture would give out from it was like best in show, first place, second place, third place. And I looked at that amount of money and I said, wait, we could pay every artist in the show. Seriously, we could refund their application fee, and then we could really encourage all those people and also defray their exhibition costs, because there really are costs associated with transporting work, shipping work. We have installers, so that's already a supportive structure. So how to make more supportive structures has always been my thing. So this year there's a few different things, and that's what I find interesting. When you enter an institution, there are real people that work at institutions. No one is defined by one institution. We probably work for many, you know, whether it's through our work or it's through our job or through associations. And I think that really artists are the voice of change within institutions, because if I had never said, hey, we could pay all the artists, that would just go on and on and on and on, would perpetuate for years. So that's something that if you're working in an institution and feeling frustrated, I would really encourage you to be the voice of change. And there are times when I approach I have really great colleagues. I'm very blessed. I've had really bad colleagues in the past who've actually had downsized departments I've worked in. But my colleagues now are all really receptive, and sometimes they're thinking about the institution in one way, and I'm thinking about the institution in another way, and we have a conversation, and I'll be told no, this is the way things have been for 25 years, and I'm like, okay, I need to reframe what I'm saying. I need to revisit this, and and change is slow, and that's the beauty of it, that people come around the more you say something, but you can say it really delicately and really beautifully and not be really insistent. You can actually come back tomorrow and say it a different way. And I've even learned that about exhibiting myself, that I was getting really tense about this show at Locust because I wanted to get the word out really early, and they have their own process and a marketing team, so I had to kind of be no, wait a second, change the way you're thinking. Nothing is stopping you from being your own promoter. They're going to promote it too, and actually if you both promote it, more people will probably come. So let me know if I have to stop. I can, kind of go through. This is Marina Font's work. I love this work too. This is 22 pieces, and Marina is from Argentina. She lives in Miami Beach. She told me that these were mental maps of all of the spaces that she lived in before being 21. So she moved more times than there were years. I know, I found that so fascinating. And in terms of displacement, which I believe is something all artists go through, this was very interesting to me too. This work has really informed me and thinking about, mentally you have an impression of a space, and that might be different than the actual space. And I think there's such a beauty and sensitivity in this work. So yeah, this close-up of one of them. It's all fabric on portraits. So she's a good photographer and fiber artist, and she combines the two. Very delicate, just gorgeous work. Here's some more details. There's a tent behind the doily piece, and this is inside the tent. And I was joking because I had a couple of intense moments at the opening, and I like to say that exhibitions make artists nervous, and I feel it in myself as well, so I'm guilty of it too. When I'm curating something, I don't feel nervous. I'm the work is up. I don't have any problems, because there's also technological issues with a lot of the shows that I do, actually the push lights that are in the front. That's the next image. They say no bullshit. This is early Karen Reifus work. Karen Reifus is about to have this huge painting retrospective at the Bass Museum in Miami Beach. It's going to be so exciting. It's going to open early May. I don't know do you know the date, Virginia?
No.
Early May. Just think early May. Stay tuned for the Bass and their new shows. But what I love about visiting older artists is that they have 30 years of work. And that's fascinating, to just look at every body of work and to go well, what were you making in the 90s? You were making no bullshit, push lights? Wow, that's pretty amazing, because those are really crappy lights. And so the thing that I find so interesting about these lights is that they burn out all the time. So I have a lot of burnt out bulbs in these lights. And Karen and I were talking about she actually gave me a bunch of boxes and was here's my boxes from the 90s. There's probably some bulbs in there. Look at those, see if those work, and I might go to this old hardware store in Hollandale called Barnett's. I've never been, but there's going to be a day where I go in that place, because seems like there's a lot of things from the past. But So some of them work, some of them don't. I bought rechargeable batteries because I started to feel guilty about the batteries that I was burning out. But it's interesting, like, she made this work during the Bush administration. She was just really pissed and made work about it, which I think is so...
It seems so relevant now, right?
Yeah, and it is. Exactly, and I think the thing that's interesting to me in talking to... In the next couple of years at Art and Culture Center, the thing that I'm trying to do is pair collections with projects from artists. So bringing in an artist to do a solo project and pair it with a collection. And I've been really interested in collectors here in South Florida because they let you go into their house. I mean, when I lived in the Northeast, I couldn't even figure out who the collectors were, and found it really frustrating because my friends who were doing really well, and when you go to a place like Yale, you watch people become famous, and you can't help but feel like, what am I doing wrong? Why is this confusing art world? You know, why is it like this? But I found that down here, it's a little easier to know who these people are, and actually that collectors also need curators to become relevant, or to at least, they're already relevant, but to show the collection and give it a context. And then I also think that artists need to meet collectors. So it's kind of, and then doing more group shows, I find that more galleries come in and actually look for new artists. So there's kind of this relationship that I'm starting to be able to see that I was never able to see before. But I find it fascinating that often museum curators, they're interested in the work now, new work that's never been shown before, which really puts artists into that frenzy of making a lot of work fast and also like sticking to one type of work. But very few of us, I think, actually make one body of work only. So I like to show the work that isn't getting any attention from an artist that is doing quite well, who's at Emerson Dorish, who has the solo at the Bass, because it shows a chronology that I think is important, and like you said, it's relevant, so why not have a conversation? And that's what I think centers can do, art and culture centers, because we're a nonprofit space. We depend on a variety of revenue, from fundraising to local support through Hollywood, state funding, federal funding. It's like, it's really a pot of stew of fundraising. So if our mission doesn't have to be to primarily sell the work, then in my mind the mission has to be to contextualize the work. And then also sometimes we sell work, which is good too. But I like centers because they allow you to see these conversations. This is another Karen Reifus piece, Heart, Soul, and Devotion. And this was about the Catholic priest issue of all of these molestation cases, and her feeling like people put their heart and soul, or told to put their heart and soul into the church and to be devout, and there's all this corruption. Like, how do we process this? So I like the pinball machine because it's a dark piece, and I like that it takes your money. Like, and doesn't give you anything, you know. And a few people have done that, which I find so hilarious that, you know, it's almost like its own indulgence. And I find that to be really cool. This work is by 3 artists, a feminist collective. They're all moms, and some of them have older children, some of them have younger children, but it's Patricia Schnall-Gutierrez, who is based in Hollywood. She just recently moved to Hollywood from Miami, so we gained an awesome artist. And Rhonda Mitriani and Marina Font. So Marina Font has the photos with the fiber mental maps. And they basically got together and they were talking about feeling fractured and displaced from their own bodies and from their own homes and from their own domestic labor. And I always think of Judy Chicago's Dinner Party when I see this piece, even though it's not a triangle and it's not like really intense fiber work, but still some of the same ideas where what would a party look like for women, you know? And so all of these videos talk, and they're all women just discussing what they do. So there's one woman that's always like, the shopping and all the shopping, and I hate shopping. And then there's this other woman who, all the way to the right, I find her really funny. I hope I get to meet this person because she just like is in a character, and she keeps saying like, it's perfect, and every time I say the word perfect, I hear her voice, and I'm like, why do we say that word? Like, why? And she also talks about like, oh, did you try this sour cream thing? It's really yummy. And she's being so sarcastic, and she's just like sick of herself, you know? And then another woman, the one to the left, I like really feel for because she's just like, I'm trying to get it together. It might not look like that, but I'm trying to get it together. And I'm like, you look so beautiful, and I can't believe you think that people don't think you have it together, you know? Like, that's just like so wrought. Like, why do you feel that way? And they're all talking about it, and there's like a clamor of voices in the gallery right now, so it always feels like someone's in there. It's like haunted by this table. But I love the work because for me, work that's really difficult like this, that makes you feel fragmented, is actually the artist dealing with that fragmentation and wanting to feel whole. So I had this really interesting family come in, and they were visiting from Brazil. And you know, I speak some Spanish, but really not, I don't speak Portuguese. So we were like, really like forming our own language, but, and I was talking primarily to like the father in this family, and learned that they were coming to the States to have the first baby, which was just like, wow. So they were like, this piece freaked us out. Like, this piece was the scary piece, because they were thinking about their family being whole in the same place, and like, dealing with this video of these women like being disgruntled, you know. But work that makes you think like that, for me, is some of the best work, because it's difficult, and why don't we like difficult? Like, we should, like for me, I learn a lot from this piece. I'm like, all these women feel this way. So they all feel like they're supposed to be perfect. They're not. And there has to be another conversation that can come out of it, you know. So it's really perplexing and beautiful. This is Nick Mashi. He's the one guy. I had to put a guy in the show. I don't believe in doing shows that are just women or just men or just artists from Brazil or just anything. You know, there's always a counter argument or a counterbalance. So this artist was doing a lot of tints that were multiplying, that became like very kind of human feeling and fleshy, and I put him in two of the shows. So I thought they worked really well with the habitats. This is Eurydice's work. This work was hard for the Art and Culture Center, and like we have a really interesting community, because like we get a lot of people from the airport, which I think is fascinating. I mean, it's the type of space where there's not always like 50 people in the gallery, but there are days where you see 20 people and they're from all over the world, which I've never worked in a place like this before. So like one day I met somebody from Ohio, and then I met someone from Brazil, and then I met someone from Sweden, and then I met someone from London, and I was like, oh wow, like I'm in a very interesting intersection, and I like intersections because people ask me a lot about the Miami-Broward divide, and I'm like, this is a fascinating, great problem to have. You guys live in a metro area. You can be in Broward and have a great time. You can be in Miami and have a great time. You can go up to West Palm Beach and have a great time. You can now get on the Bright Line. Like, you can actually go to different cultural places. There aren't a lot of places where you can do that. So for me, the intersection in Hollywood is fascinating, because people for the opening come from Miami and Davie and Fort Lauderdale and sometimes West Palm Beach. So that is an incredible place for change, because you don't just have one perspective at the opening. You have a lot of different people. And Eurydice was my Miami Beach artist, who is an alum of Art Center, and actually felt displaced from Art Center, because when Art Center sold their building, the artists that were in that old Lincoln Road corner space, they were making money as artists. They were selling their work. I was like amazed. Someone was telling me that he sold a piece for $20,000 one day, like with a credit card. Just he made the transaction. So that there was something about that space on the corner where it brought in this international community of people that were quickly buying things and on vacation. you know, and now that the space is in a recessed building in the middle of the mall and it's hard to find my studio, it's not like that. It's a very theoretical program, you know. So it's like, it's interesting like that she has that perspective. And her work is like very LGBTQ positive. She is someone who, she moved here from Lesbos, she's from Greece. And she has a really like wonderful personality. There's something about her that's like mysterious, and her work is like, she made these big tapestries when she had access to a schoolhouse. So she, you know, made this work at a specific time in her life where she was blessed with space, and she had never shown them really. Like they really didn't get out of her Tupperware that she like boxed it up in. So I was like, we have this space, and this one is really special because it's on a curved wall. So it actually kind of is about 3 inches off the wall. So it really has a presence. And it's all embroidery on linen and canvas, and all of these tapestries, a lot of them are from India. She lived in India for a while. This work is referencing Lacan and a lot of like Greek and Roman ideas about male beauty. So the 2 other pieces were very much about like femininity and like being in charge of your body and feeling powerful. And this work is kind of about confused male identities. So I thought that was really interesting too. Sri Prabha, he lives in Hollywood. He's from Hyderabad, India. And he does a lot of work. I look at his work as though he's taking images of objects that are everyday and then trying to make very surreal worlds out of them. So we printed these photographs just for this show. Art and Culture Center commissioned them. We paid him to make that new work. And that was the great thing about the grant. My initial conversations with him were, I would normally pay you for a solo. I really don't know what's in the budget. Can we move forward? And he was really good about being accepting of what I wanted. And I was like, I really want to show these digital prints that you've never produced before that only exist digitally. And he got them printed and spent almost $1,000. And we were able to pay him. So I was just like, okay. This work is video work. There's 2 slides that I have, and it kind of modulates. And he makes a lot of work about like Eastern and Western sensibility and found objects. And it's a meditative video where you're supposed to find your center within this. And something about his work that really makes these surreal connections with everyday objects in one's body, and also there's kind of like an ohm throughout the space, so it's a nice decompression solo exhibition. Then you move into plush. So I just took you through the large gallery and around the corner into the middle gallery and this space that's carpeted. So this was one of those spaces where I was like, okay, carpeting, this is hard. I don't love the carpeting. What am I gonna do? And we have like an uneven floor, so you can't just rip it up. Like it's gonna cost thousands of dollars to actually put in a new floor. So I was like, okay, I like this gallery in 2 ways, right? So that the walls and floor are neutral, or video work and sound work, because it's the one space that doesn't echo because of the carpeting, where the carpeting is actually an asset. So this is a show that I do annually, and it just had an open call out for it. We also have a rotating review. So if you go to the Art and Culture website, and if you want to take my card, I have it. You can go to open calls and opportunities, and there's always like 4 listed. There's a rotating review where you can just submit any idea you have for free. We have flagpole that I'm trying to make a rotating opportunity. I've had a few flags. There'll be another one up this summer. So artist flags is a thing that I'm into. There's this institution in New York called the Knockdown Center, and they have a flag opportunity where you can just send in a flag and they will raise it, no questions asked. I'm sure, depending on what the flag says, there might be some limitations there, you know, but I realized we had flagpoles and we had these banners that were falling down, like we had these like cross beams, and they just were old, they fell down, and I was like, let's raise some flags. So that's an opportunity that's It's like a self-sustaining $25 fee. There's one for a frosted window that's in my office, which I thought that was how I responded to having programming in place at the institution. Because in my last institution, there was no programming in place and I had to hustle to turn around exhibitions every month. This institution had 2 years of programming and I was like, well, I can create new opportunities also. There's nothing stopping me. And everyone was really cool with it and excited about it, so it was good. So this is a show of soft materials. I'm really invested in fiber art in general for several reasons. Like, I do make fiber art. Also, it's an art form that's just now starting to get some attention and momentum as a fiber art and not a craft. So for me, like, we have to do shows about fiber right now. But this show was interesting because not all the work was technically traditional fiber. So this is Carrie Phillips, also an Art Center alum. She does all these carpet pieces. She's going to have some more work at Girls Club in a month. They're doing a dog-friendly exhibition with dog portraits, so Carrie will have some work there. I found it fascinating because that work was cut up carpets, so she had taken family photos and recreated them. This is more work by an artist who I'm just starting to get to know. Her name's Gianna, and she does a lot of work about like dead flowers. And you wouldn't know that looking at the piece. They're very happy. The pieces, they're very happy and beautiful. They're on linen, but she's trying to memorialize these flowers in the kind of forms that they fall into as they crumble and separate. So I thought that was interesting. Just out of school, she's like really excited to show. Virginia has the pieces to the right of this photo. They're these two AstroTurf pieces that, what I like about them is that they're these fragments into worlds and neighborhoods, you know, and she was making a lot of work about sustainability at the time and also kind of working with some artificial materials, and they're great objects. And I enjoyed that there is a material conversation between one of the frames is concrete and the other one
faux concrete.
Is faux concrete. So there's this like artificial and real materiality in there that I just really think is quite nice. And there's two other pieces here too. Susie Navon, and she has this vase that's wrapped with really interesting kind of braiding. And Arlette, a good friend of mine who is also an Art Center alum. This is Patricia Schnall-Gutierrez, who's part of the collective. She also has another piece in Habitat. This I thought was interesting because I was trying to figure out her relationship to this woman, who has really long legs, by the way, you know? And she was like, I don't know, I found this on the internet and she wasn't a porn star. I was like, okay. So, tell me more. And I was like, yeah, but I just thought, she's like, she's so confident. I just thought she must be a porn star, but she's like a woman, a real woman, who like took this photo and like confidently put it on the internet. There's no photos after that or before that. There's no story. So what I got from this is that she like identifies with this woman somehow, like in, like that they are a similar age and that there's this desire to be sexy, but also to deal with domesticity. And it is interesting because that photo is on like a bed and it does feel like a real place. So I thought that was interesting. And Virginia has another piece to the left here. Sorry, to the right. Sometimes directions, you know, giving you bad directions here. But this piece, I believe, is called Shirt. And yeah, Suit. Okay. It's hard to remember. It's hard to remember titles, names, but and I thought it was interesting because I see the collar and, you know, the opening of the shirt or the suit, and I liked the kind of like direction that the lines are going in and the use of material. So sometimes it's really interesting to look at work that deals with elements, like elements of the suit, you know, and just kind of think about, well, what is a garment, you know, and how is it constructed? And then the work to the left of that is also Karen Reifus' pieces. I joke that for some reason in my studio visit with Karen Reifus, I asked to borrow everything from her kitchen and bathroom. it just, there were these works that were so weird and quirky, and I was in her home, and that's also amazing, going through artists' homes and seeing how they live with their work. And then collectors' homes live with the work too. You get this domestic view. So she had all these little, like, she had a zipper and like a bra connector and what else? Some elastic, and she had made these little object connections. And there's the scissors say extinct on them, which I thought was really interesting. And we think about scissors, I guess, as like tools to like separate, but also to construct. But you could also like make something extinct, you know, or you could end something's life. So it's like a really interesting like kind of mind warp for me. And there's a lot of other works in this show that I don't want to like keep talking forever, so I'm going to wrap it up. But there's a lot of works in this show that really talk about fiber process, and also just that are very much about coming up with meaning through the making, which is something I believe in too. That, you know, this idea that you write the artist statement before the work. Some artists do that, and that's their practice. Like they write, they put in a proposal, it gets accepted, and then it becomes a reality. And that's one way of working. I think, you know, a lot of artists that do that also, I think their work relates to architecture a lot of times, but, you know, architecture involves drafting and 3D modeling and stuff. But I think also there's a variety of artists that I know that I belong to as well that makes things, you know, and then has to contextualize them very specifically and strategically to be accepted into institutions. So I think it's also important for institutions to know that as curators, like I find a freedom in creating context for artists and finding something that can be in conversation with something else, because I think it informs artists and it informs me and it informs the institution. So that's what's fun about this particular show. So visit us at the Art and Culture Center. We definitely have open calls. We have 4 at the moment, and I really want that institution to be very accessible. I think it has been for 40 years, over 40 years. It's been a very accessible space, and I think it can be even more accessible. So it's one of my missions. I think, yeah, that was the end of my current work and the Art and Culture Center work. And do you guys have any questions? Or yeah, Taryn.
Did you make your dress?
Yes. I've made 2 this year. I made dresses in grad school in connection with my work, and I received a lot of criticism at Yale because people were like, is that fashion? You know, that's a different industry and you could go into fashion. And I was like, that's not a cutthroat industry or anything. I think it's probably just as bad, if not worse than art, so thank you very much. But it actually stunted me. So lately, for some reason, down here, I feel like I can do this. I can wear this, you know, and it's very slow. But actually, over the summer, I'm going to Italy, which was very hard for the Art and Culture Center, but like also a great learning curve for me and for them, I think, where I applied to this residency because I've taught in Italy before. The last time I was in Tuscany, I was teaching. And I was like, oh, if I could be back here as an artist. And I kind of knew at that point that I was probably going to take a break from teaching and focus on curating and making. But I'm going back, and one of the projects that I'm doing is to make a series of dresses for passeggiata, which is it's like happy hour time. But I've never experienced this before, but at 4 o'clock, communities come out and they have some gelato, and passeggiata means to walk slowly, and they literally walk slowly, and they like look around, and like you see grandma out with, you know, the parents and the kids, and like everyone's in the Duomo, and I've literally, I think my jaw dropped a little bit. This idea that everyone stops culturally and takes a moment to breathe. So I'm looking forward to doing that again. Yeah, and trying to learn Italian, but like finding it's hard to focus, but that, you know, still doing it. But yeah, thank you. Yep, I made it. Hopefully it looks good.
So while you were at Yale, I assume you were, that you were still doing fiber and installation while you were there.
Yeah.
So you touched a little on the craft versus art. Were they accepting of what you were doing, or were they giving you that this is craft, not? I mean, did you get a lot of slack for what you were doing, or were they advanced enough to accept fiber arts as a fine art?
I think my perspective now, because I'm getting similar feedback now at Art Center, is that they just wanted me to take a position. And a lot of times, and like I could always handle criticism, but it was always harsh. And like, I think even the old me, like with artist friends, found it harsh. And like now, I don't think of it that way. I think about it as, well, what's your position, Laura? Is craft art? And I had that happen at Locust Projects today, where the exhibition designer, Ricky, was like, hi, like there's a couple things here that you don't write about that I know are interesting, and like one of them was crafts, and he was just like, so is it okay for me to say that you reference American crafts? And I found myself saying, I'd like to reference the craft community, because I like this idea of getting together and making. So I think that artists do that and want to do that more, and like craft community, absolutely. Like, so, and then both a collector and a dealer last year, one I approached and was very interested in her showing my work. She just gave me a lot of hard advice, but it was all good advice, and I took it all, which is the difference now, I think, as like someone who's not enrolled in a program. It's like, oh, I'm gonna take your advice. I asked you to come over, actually, and I gave you cookies, so I asked to be tortured this way. So she was just like, you know, you can pitch these things to institutions, you can engage community that way, and I think it will be really meaningful, you know. And I got into the Siena Arts Institute after that advice, actually, and it's through a university. It's through Brandeis has a study abroad program, and there will be students and also a blind community that I will be working with. Yeah, it's exciting. And I'm going to do a clothing exchange and material exchange with them. I'm interested in sourcing the material that I work with and not just buying it. And yeah, I had another weird experience lately where I did a material exchange at Art Center as a way to like try out this programming. And artists came and like looked around, and some of them gave me a few clothes, but they didn't want to take anything. And I was talking with my friend Neil Ramsey, and he was like, isn't it interesting that people want to give you things, but they feel guilty about taking the things? You know, I don't know how you felt.
That's how I felt.
Because you were there, and I don't know why, but I was like, you want to give me, but you don't want to take from me. But then the weirdest thing that happened was that I received these really big material donations from businesses, and right after that, they saw it, and this Jewish community center in Miami Beach just went out of business, which was sad, and it was really kind of like, it was interesting to go there and to go into the craft closet, because there was absolutely everything that had been made for every holiday for like at least a decade, and I could just take from it, and I didn't want to take this stuff, but I also was like, don't you need this material? Like, do you really want to buy it? So I ended up like, the budget that I had put, that I had figured out for Locust, a lot of the biggest line item was material, because material is expensive. And I actually am now able to like shift the budget to pay more artists. So I'm like, oh wow, this is really nice. But yeah, like, I don't know, there's some interesting like community stuff going on for me, really for the first time. So I feel very lucky to be practicing here, because there's this interesting exchange. But
I just want to make a comment. Oh, the presentation was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I really like the talk about the finances of the artist. And I come from a different world. I just got into the art world, and my
What
background, I was a banker in my previous life, but now I'm a curator. But I found it that change in the art world about artists were very accepting of not being paid for their labor, and I've always found that really hard to understand. And I still
And you
do.
should.
Yeah, I still have that problem. And I'm like, well, we all need a living wage. There's labor laws, and I don't understand why some of this doesn't apply in the art world, or why we let the art world get away with some of these. You know,
Yeah.
so I think that's a really good topic. And I like how you're always leveraging your resources to try to pay your artists. I think that's important.
Well, I think I'm glad that you brought it up in that way, because other fields think that we are crazy. And I think it's important that we look at that part of what we do as dysfunctional. Like, let's just say it's dysfunctional. Like when we're being asked to work for free, let's go, that's dysfunctional. And I like to say that free opportunities definitely lead to more free opportunities. So if you want, and vice versa, you know, if you paid opportunities result in more paid opportunities. And it just like with that fundamental change, like I had this talk with my two preparators who I love dearly. They're both artists. I mean, like we're friends. We don't hang out every night, but like, you know, they're in my community, and one is at a gallery and one is not. And I was like, I try to send them stuff to apply to, and Locust is one of them, because any of you could apply to Locust at any time throughout the year, right now, in a month, 3 months from now, like, you know, and nobody knows. You don't know if someone's gonna like your work. You have no idea, but you can also, with institutions that have open calls, if you go to every opening and then you apply to something, your chances are higher, and like they'll get to know you. And I do that too. Like if artists keep coming, I'm like, well, you must want to be in a show, you know. I mean, I know why you're there. And so it's like there's sort of this etiquette, but there's a lot of circles that we dodge, because I find people saying, I asked my preparator, I'm like, he had a studio visit with a director at Locust. And I was like, so are you going to apply to the open call? And he was just like, no. Like, I just like what I do. I don't need the affirmation. And I was like, but I think you probably get it. You just had the studio visit. Like, step 1 crossed off the list, go to step 2. But I find that it's like, I think what's been happening is that over the past, like, I don't know, 30 years of arts institutions, like, people have done it for so long for a labor of love, and arts institutions are also struggling. This year in Florida,
they're all getting cut, especially
all of us.
We've gotten cut. And when you're in grad school, you're expected to work for free, so that kind of puts you in a mindset that you like doing it, so you've got all these different things.
It also it's about the insecurity, like being like, oh, I'm not enough to like apply for that. Just like that's why you've been taught in the university.
Right,
Like
exactly.
until you get to a certain point, don't apply to those things. So it's just like
It's institutionalized, yeah.
Yeah, it's institutionalized trauma, I think, if we look at it that way.
Well,
Yeah.
you also, when
Yeah.
you do apply, then you get, you know, if you apply.
Oh, you get rejected.
You get rejected all the
just to
time,
build yourself
so.
a tough skin.
Yeah.
Like, okay, they
Yeah.
say no, someone else will like it.
Right, but I think that that's why you get that insecurity too. It doesn't help when you get rejected all the time.
No, and like I had that happen last Wednesday or Thursday. I got 2 rejections, local rejections. You know, I know that the people knew me who reviewed the applications, and it was like, and one of them was like managed through Locust, and it was a ceremony, and like I caught myself like saying all these bad things, like, oh, they hate your work, you know, but like the reality was not that at all. Like Locust is trying to support as many artists as possible so that they don't leave the area, you know. So I kind of like decided to come on my own terms. Like I went home and ate a real dinner and walked my dog and was like, this is a healthy thing to do. And then I went, and they did announce my show, and I was like, see, what's your problem? Like, show for all your artists, give them all hugs, say congratulations, like listen to their presentations. You were honored to. It's like the same thing. But there is periods of time where like sometimes you have a rough 2 years or so where you don't show at all, and it sucks because like you're hungry, like you have ideas, and like, you know, but then there's a couple things you can ask yourself, like how many applications did I put out there? But you can also ask people directly. You can like form relationships with realtors or bankers. and like find people in different fields often have things to offer. And especially in Miami, like I found that for better or for worse, because there's so much gentrification, there's also like a set of like just, I don't know, like building managers and real estate people that actually really like artists. So like the DuPont building is a good example downtown. If you've never been, check it out, because like artists have been doing interventions through Gary Ressler, and I'm about to do one too, and he does pay you. You know, it's like you get paid $900, you come in, you activate a window space. You know, window spaces are like hard because there's so much glass, but if these people have an interest to also go to the wage site and to actually look up the honorarium and to pay each artist an honorarium, there might be more potential there to actually work with developers and people in different fields. You've got to understand developers also have architectural backgrounds and like know a little bit about art. So I don't know. I think there's also like a moment where it's like institutions have to shift and then artists have to ask for more all the time. Just like always pay yourself $900 if you do a project, you know, just like, and if you sell a piece of artwork, never sell a piece of artwork for less than that. But also take an initiative and like write somebody from Hyperallergic when you have a show before it opens, and like, you know, go talk to somebody and also approach people who've supported you in the past and be like, what is this weird trajectory that I'm on? Can you like help me? But the other thing that I find weird, and I think artists should ask for, like you should invite people into your studio as well. Like you should just invite people who you want to see your work, who can give you those opportunities. But also, it's hard for collectors and dealers to, so there's also a difference in like who you're inviting. Like if you're inviting a curator like me, you should be asking me for a show. If you're inviting a collector or a dealer in, you should be asking about like the saleability of your work, you know, and they're not going to tell you either. Like they're not going to feel comfortable telling you, because that's a scary position for a collector or dealer, because they don't want to tell you that your work sucks and they don't want to tell you to stop making art, and they're worried that you might. And Dennis Scholl, who's the new director at Art Center, just for the first time gave me my first commercial advice, and he asked me if I wanted to hear it, because he was like, I see some things that I can tell you about, do you want to know them? Because he was worried that, and it's not the installation work, by the way, big surprise, right? He's like, you can show these installations at universities, spaces, but like you're not gonna, like you can make a small wage by pushing for it, like with a proposal-based process, but if you want to sell work, then he talked to me about like the other work that I was doing that was small and told me how to push it, and was like, hey, if you want me to come back, I'll come back and talk to you about those pieces. And also he and the other dealer that I kind of mentioned, I don't want to list everyone's name, but they both told me straight to my face that no one cares about my career except for me. And that when they wake up in the morning, they're not thinking about my artwork. And I don't blame them. You know, maybe they're thinking about their wife or their dog, or like, you know, how much time it's going to take to get on the plane to go to New York. So, and I told that to another artist, and they were like, that person sounds like a real jerk. I was like, no, I think that person is smart. Like, because they're true. It's true. Like, Dennis he has a career too. You know, so like there are things that he's doing in his day, and he's like micro-focused. I'm micro-focused. So like if I want his attention, then I have to ask for it. So like, I don't know, that like I kind of have like a tough skin for myself, and like I like talking about this stuff because it's very confusing. Like people don't feel comfortable talking about it.
Nobody talks about it.
They what?
I said nobody talks about it. Like you said earlier, it's a thing that we don't talk about. It's uncomfortable.
Nobody likes to talk about money.
I know, that's another
People are
thing.
very uncomfortable.
That's the whole class
And
thing.
so many people say to me, I'll go into an artist's studio and ask them how much this piece is, and they go, I don't know.
That's terrible. You should always know.
Something in this world
should
that
just
doesn't know
say
what
a
it
number
Yeah,
costs.
at
there's
that
another
point.
problem, like
Yeah.
putting prices on your stuff. It's just like,
It's hard.
how much you gonna sell something that you produce? Like, how much you believe on yourself?
But I like your rule, $900. Even if you don't have a price, $900.
$900 is a really good starting point.
Sure is.
Yeah, I like the 900. I've sold, well, yeah, the one work, I've actually only sold one work of art. It was $900. And I don't know, it's like, you factor in your time, the materials, and if the work is sold before. That's how you come up with a number. But I think like Virginia's saying that she's asked that question and people have not known, that's a scary moment because no one will ever sell anything with that sort of mindset. And like the other thing is like you can ask for one like larger topic before. I know I've been talking for 1,000 years, but like we ask for free space a lot. I don't really know why. Because like, okay, you have a free space, then what? You know, I mean, you can have a free space and be destitute. And I had a friend visit me, my friend, she's really good Israeli artist, Tamar Atun. She's doing the Artist in the Everglades residency this summer. So if you see Tamar Atun or you see some really bright performance work with costumes, that's her. And she was a really good friend in grad school. She dated my roommate and we connected. We did yoga together, like someone who I really love. And I've always loved her work. But I didn't move to New York. And she did right after grad school. And I had lived there right before. And I'm like, I love New York, but I couldn't live there because I need to work and it's really expensive. And I actually want to have a studio. And like right now it's like, wow, no state income taxes, subsidized studio. I don't know, artists that don't have subsidized studios I've seen do really great public projects here and like really interesting. There's some really robust, Miami-Dade and Broward have robust public art programs and lots of open calls, by the way. And I'm on the jury for the Broward Public Art Committee now. And there's a lot of stuff here. But she has a free studio in Times Square, which not many people have, through her family connection. And wanted to meet up when she knew I moved to Miami, started Instagram liking me. I'm like, what? She snubbed me a couple years ago and saw me in Chelsea and literally said, are you still in New Haven and why? Now wants to have a coffee with me? I don't know why. But like she came to this realization that she shows in Performa every year. She has like a video piece projected in Times Square right now. Big opportunities, they look glossy, they look beautiful. She's had several magazine articles, she's with a gallery. She's so broke right now. And she told me, like heart to heart, woman to woman, hey, I'm broke, I would like to have a relationship. I would like to have a kid one day. I have no relationship. I'm hustling, always traveling. And like the thing is, this woman is like also very collaborative and has a project called The Moving Company that's all about performance art, and I just love what she does, but I feel like, does it have to be that bad? Does this really have to be this brutal for people? Because
Be successful.
I'm looking at her and going, well, you're Israeli, and like you have you have culture attached to you. You're beautiful. You're young. I thought you definitely checked those boxes that I was talking about. So, like we have to stand up, I think, and be like, no. and she is getting paid for these opportunities, but that's like the other thing I worry about sometimes is like you also apply to something but can't necessarily see how it connects to the other. So, and this is where it gets tricky, and these are the things that I think about, and I guess we'll see what happens, but sometimes when I get an opportunity, I try to connect it to where I am now. So I no longer feel bad about like going to Art Center and saying, I got into this, how can you support it? So that you're gonna Instagram about it, but can you partially support it? But then the other thing is, it's really hard to have that confidence when you have all these like, I call them like the old cassette tapes. When like you're walking into the meetings that you've set up to be tortured in, remember? And like, you know, you have all this fuzz coming out of your ears of like the old cassette tape that's going like, your work sucks and nobody likes you. I mean, it's not that bad. My inner monologue is not that bad, but there is like an insecure, there is like an insecure side that's like, but how are you gonna ask someone for money? Like how, like literally, how do you do it? Do you know?
I do it all the time.
Tell us.
I published a book and I called, like, I had a list of 21 people. I called 5 that said yes, and said, okay, I'm done, and I got the money. And they
Oh, really? You
gave me
only called 5?
of my list. Well, I got 5 who said yes, and then I actually ended up with 2 who said yes, and that's exactly. And then I wanted more because I didn't want just their money, I wanted their support.
Yeah.
And I wanted their PR support.
So how did you get a list of 21 people that you thought were worth
I went on
asking?
the internet and looked up everyone for the subject I was interested in.
Oh, you didn't even know these
I did
people.
a 1-month artist
I
residency
thought you
in
knew
Ireland.
these people. Wow.
Yeah, I did 1-month artist residency in Ireland, and then I had an opportunity to do an exhibit that's still going on. And I made the reception to be in March because I wanted to get it around St. Patrick's Day, even though it's been up since January. And I thought, oh, you've got 2 weeks to go, you need to produce a book. So I gave myself 2 weeks to get my backers and create the book and get it printed, and it all fell into place.
I want to come to your talk. Yeah. That's awesome. But how did you get the confidence? Because I think that's what we struggle with. Like,
That's it.
like
Well,
how do you?
I've been a personal business coach forever, it seems. I'll only admit to 25 years. So I've been helping people do that for a long time.
Really?
And,
Wow.
and I love that. That's probably my first love, is inspiring people to be all who they're meant to be. To me, if we don't have people connecting with their true self, then we miss all the gems that they have within them to share with us. So that to me is the most important reason of the work that I do. It's probably more important than any of my photography or anything else. That's a personal mission. And so once you have that, and I would say even if you don't think you can, do it anyways. I think that's the most important thing. Is in my case, I decided it was going to be in Ireland. I looked for every business that I could think of, like a chamber of commerce, pubs, cleaning companies, anything that said Ireland in the name. I made my list. I knew what I wanted to ask for. I was very clear about it. But you can't just be, it's clear, but you can't be direct. There's a conversation. I have a conversation. For me, selling is not about selling. It's about connecting. And so I'm just I'm inviting them to something I think is valuable. And the guy who gave me the money from the pub said, I'm not going to make anything from you. We had like 7 or 8 conversations. Nothing's going to come from this, but I like you. We spoke on the phone so many times. So he came around and said, I
You
like
could do
you.
a show of your work, and then you have all these people come, and he gets more sales and more
Yeah.
customers maybe.
Well, he already did show, and then he didn't show up, but he did take the postcards to give out, and that was very nice. And we had 200, and as you said, I didn't rely on even though the well-respected arts big art supporter in Broward County, who hosted my existence, still is hosting it, even though she had her own PR machine, I realized I couldn't rely on that. I said, well, do you have a magazine article? Well, I didn't hear anything that I didn't like the answer that I got because I didn't get an answer. So I said, well, who do I know? I used to be in news and media relations, and I went and called FIU, and I said, okay, so then I had invited the person there to come, and we did a video. So I think ultimately it is up to us. At some point, we get enough traction, and we'll be Virginia, but we're not all.
Yeah, Virginia.
We got to. You have to. I think a lot about anything in life, not just being an artist. Virtually anything you said, whether it's about displacement or anything else, it affects all of us, whatever our passion is. And once we start owning it, and from a place of loving ourselves, and that's believing in ourselves, then you'll find the courage to do it. But I would recommend, if you've got some project that you want to do, just whether you think you can do it or not, do it. Just like Nike said, do it. Make your list and decide you're just going to call 5 people that day. There was one year in my life I decided I want to be published in 10 magazines. And you know what? It happened. It always starts with your intention. So
Write it down, make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You start with the intention. make it bigger than you think you can do it, because that's the best way to get there. If you make it small, then that's all you're gonna get. I remember years ago, a coaching client said to me, you know, I did everything you said, I got that job, and it happened instantly. And she went wherever I went to the whole but she said, the only thing is, I didn't ask for enough. She would go in with it, from the mindset, creates a reality. So it always starts not from outside of you, it always starts inside of you. So that makes all the difference. So in my case, it wasn't a huge number, but it was more than I was willing to put out for my own, having published other books. I didn't want to go that route again. I thought, well, let me go on someone else's dime. And that we can also serve each other. And then today, the #1 sponsored my book. I got an email saying, oh, we're doing a golfing event. We'd like to give you, would you like to have a piece to put into the giveaway bag, the free bag that they give with the gifts and stuff. I thought, whoa. I said, do you need that? Is it for tomorrow? She said, no, their wording's a little different. It said Friday, it didn't say Friday next, but I thought it was going to be tomorrow. Turns out the event's next Friday. So I said, that's so nice, we'll all benefit. And she said, oh, it was just for you. I said, no, because I will give back to you as well, because I create a relationship with them. I believe in their, I wanted a nonprofit for my exhibit to support that was relayed to Ireland. So,
Nice.
So
Yeah, like getting the ball rolling and staying focused. And like the other thing, like when you mentioned not asking for enough money, another thing that I would add to that list of like 20 is to call up 5 friends, because I did that with the Art and Culture Center position actually, because I was I was definitely working for less in my last role. I'm like, well, this can't continue, because like if you actually think about your years adding up, you're like, oh my God, like if I get paid less than, let's say it's less than 5,000 a year if I get paid less than I deserve, and that's 5,000, like multiplied by the years, think about how much money I'm losing. So like I called 5 friends, older friends, and I said like, well, what did you negotiate for? Or like, and like there are always other things you can negotiate for too, even if it's not the money. Like sometimes it's like, oh, you can negotiate for extra vacation time, or you can negotiate for like taking a trip, or like a line item in a budget. And I didn't even think about that until I talked to somebody who had worked many positions and like found that
there are tremendous things you could ask for cars.
Yeah.
It depends on
could
the
ask for
opportunity.
technology.
Absolutely.
In my case, material. Like So that's really good, inspiring comments. Thank you.
There's actually, please give Laura one more round of applause. She was fantastic.